On the night of May 6th and 7th, Bharat pounded terrorist camps and launch pads in Pakistan, and Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. What followed was a military escalation by Pakistan, which was duly countered by Bharat by pounding 11 air bases and, as per the latest reports, almost 30 locations in Pakistan. Well, that even included a deep strike on an AWACS, almost 300 kilometers inside Pakistan. Then, the DGMO of Pakistan called the DGMO of Bharat on a hotline and begged for a ceasefire. Bharat agreed, but referred to it as a tactical pause. However, based on the initial assertion by the President of the United States that it was the US that brokered the deal, the Grand Old Party of Bharat, the Indian National Congress, started its rhetoric of claims that Bharat surrendered and didn't go all out on Pakistan to take back the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The Crown Prince of the Business House of Indian National Congress went on to make these statements in media briefings. And these clips are now, honestly, the life support for Pakistan to further its agenda. However, the jokers of Congress forget that their lineage is full of surrenders, right from the time of Jawahar to the current Bunty Babli gang. So, let's start this with the founder of the Indian National Congress. Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, is often discussed in the context of various political and military decisions during his tenure from 1947 to 1964. The word surrender in this context is more symbolic or political rather than a literal military surrender. Here are the key instances where Nehru has been criticized for perceived surrenders, especially in strategic or diplomatic terms. Episode 1. Surrenders to the British Crown. Taking oath as Provisional Prime Minister under British rule on the 2nd of September 1946. Well, this moment, honestly, gives us deeper insight into Jawaharlal Nehru's alignment with the colonial framework, even before formal independence. So, here's the background. The Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946 led to the formation of an interim government of India on the 2nd of September 1946 under British supervision. Jawaharlal Nehru was appointed as the Vice President of the Executive Council, which basically meant he was functioning as the Provisional Prime Minister, but still under the authority of the British Viceroy, Lord Wavell. India wasn't independent yet. This government was, in fact, a colonial construct created to manage the transition. What did Nehru actually do? He took the oath of office under the British Government of India Act of 1935, and the oath was administered by the Viceroy of British India. He functioned within a colonial administrative setup, with British oversight and control. Nehru did not insist on a declaration of full sovereignty, nor did he reject the authority of the British Crown at this stage. How was this perceived? Well, many revolutionaries and nationalists saw this as premature cooperation with the British, even as the country was burning with the Quit India spirit. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose's supporters, for instance, condemned this move as a betrayal of the revolutionary cause, especially as the Indian National Army trials were still ongoing. Nehru, by wearing barrister's robes during those INA trials, only added to the criticism of colonial loyalty over nationalist symbolism. The impact? It signaled Congress's willingness to inherit the British framework rather than break from it. This move established a path of continuity with colonial laws and institutions, and honestly, it strengthened Nehru's position as the face of post-independence governance, but of course, at a cost to the radical nationalist demands for complete and unconditional freedom. Taking oath of Prime Ministership under the British Crown on the 15th of August, 1947. Absolutely, this is one of those lesser-known but symbolically significant acts. Critics of Jawaharlal Nehru often cite this as a surrender to the British Crown, mainly because of the nature of his oath when he became Prime Minister in August 1947. He became Prime Minister of a dominion under the British Crown, not of a fully sovereign republic. Let's look at the background. On the 15th of August 1947, India became a dominion within the British Commonwealth, not a republic. The Indian Independence Act of 1947, which was passed by the British Parliament, established that India would remain under the nominal authority of the British Crown until a new constitution came into force, which happened on the 26th of January 1950. As per this legal framework, Jawaharlal Nehru's oath of office was taken under a system where King George VI remained the head of state, represented by the Governor-General, Lord Mountbatten. So what did Nehru do? He accepted the position of Prime Minister of a British dominion. He took the oath of allegiance administered by the Governor-General, who was a British royal appointee. Nehru did not challenge or reject the British monarch's symbolic authority at the time of India's freedom. And how was this seen? Nationalists and later-day critics viewed it as a moral and symbolic surrender, especially since millions had fought and died for complete Swarajya, or self-rule. Leaders like Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose had envisioned an India completely free from British structures, not just a dominion. Nehru's close personal rapport with Lord Mountbatten also, raised questions about post-colonial subservience. The impact was that India's full sovereignty was delayed until 1950, when it finally became a republic. This move reinforced the image of Nehru being comfortable with the colonial elite and British systems, and it created a precedent of continuity rather than rupture, which definitely influenced future governance models. Continued membership of the British Commonwealth, starting in 1947, is another key decision to consider. After independence in 1947, India remained a dominion under the British Crown, with King George VI as head of state until 1950. What did Nehru do here? He chose to retain India's membership in the British Commonwealth, even after India became a republic in 1950. He also accepted Queen Elizabeth II as the symbolic head of the Commonwealth. How did people perceive this? Critics saw it as continuing colonial subservience, a symbol of loyalty to the British Crown. Sardar Patel and others were honestly quite cautious about retaining such ties, but Nehru emphasized internationalism over nationalism. The impact? India became the first republic to remain in the Commonwealth. While this move aided India's diplomatic visibility, it was viewed by some as a psychological surrender of full sovereignty. So, after independence, there was, a strong push to replace English with Hindi and various regional languages. But, despite all those Constituent Assembly debates, Nehru actually backed the continued use of English in governance, law, and education. He advocated for a gradual transition, but in practice, he pretty much ensured that English remained dominant. Now, this was seen by many as a sort of cultural and linguistic surrender to the colonial legacy. Critics argue that it really disempowered the masses and privileged the elite English-speaking classes. Ultimately, this move created long-lasting divides between the so-called anglicized elite and native language speakers. And, well, it laid the foundations for the bureaucracy to operate in colonial frameworks even after independence. The British, as we know, looted immense wealth from India, things like the Koh-i-Noor diamond, rare manuscripts, and countless cultural treasures. But Nehru never really formally demanded the return of these colonial artifacts or any reparations. In fact, he rejected demands for the Koh-i-Noor's return, saying it was, quote, not worth fighting over. This was seen by many as indifference to civilizational justice. Critics argue that it reflected a sort of soft corner for Britain, maybe stemming from his anglicized upbringing and education at places like Harrow and Cambridge. As a result, Britain retained these looted treasures without any real formal resistance. And honestly, this fueled later nationalist demands for colonial accountability. After 1947, the top leadership of the Indian Army, Navy and Air Force, well, it actually remained under British officers. Nehru continued the services of British generals and admirals, like General Roy Bucher, until as late as 1949. This was seen by many as a kind of surrender of military sovereignty during those crucial formative years. The impact? It arguably delayed the Indianization of the armed forces at the top level, and it created a sense of mistrust between civilian leaders and Indian military veterans. So, India adopted the Westminster model of parliamentary democracy, almost without any major changes. Nehru, he strongly supported this British-style parliamentary democracy, with the Prime Minister as the first among equals, and a bicameral legislature. But honestly, critics have often seen this as a failure to develop an Indianized system that could have been rooted in panchayat or dharmic traditions. While this approach did ensure political stability, it also, entrenched the colonial administrative logic in our governance. Here's a quick summary table of Nehru's surrenders to the British Crown.